Rosy Hardy Gardening here. Now when we go to shows or we have customers coming into the nursery, there are one or two questions that are always asked, and in this little series I am going to go through them one at a time. So let's start off with the one which is most often asked to us, and that is, will this plant grow in a pot? When I'm at a show, I have to say I find that quite an irritating question. That's just me personally, because I'm sorry, but you're handing me a plant in a pot and then asking me, will it grow in a pot? I have to bite my tongue and I have to say, do you want to put it into a bigger container, a larger pot? You want to keep it in a pot all the time? Those are the sorts of things that I then have to ask you back. And you know, I know people are learning and they're wanting to understand how plants grow. If you are buying it already in a pot, in a container, then the likelihood is that plant will carry on and be able to be grown in a container, but maybe not for the whole of its life. Some plants don't actually like to be in a container for too long. This beautiful Euphorbia, which is Ascot rainbow with this lovely variegation on here, just starting to put on its flower spikes here, is something that you could grow in a container or a larger pot. Now, when you get them, they're in a certain size. They then need to go up into a bigger size. So what do you use? You can use bigger plastic containers. So rather than throwing away all those different ones that you have been given, you can have a range of different sizes to put your plants into. So you're running from something quite small for maybe you get cuttings, you can put those into that sort of container. You've got this size, which is a 3-litre container, and this one is in the taupe colour plastic, which on the continent in the EU, these are able to be recycled. In the UK, they can be recycled, but aren't recycled as much as they should be, which is a little bit of a problem. So something that is in a much smaller container, like this lovely little Ipheion here. Isn't this beautiful? Lovely blue colours, flat leaf there. This is a summer deciduous plant. So that means this is going to die off and then not show anything. So this is one of the ones whereby you'd probably put it temporarily into a container and then put it into the ground. It has a beautiful perfume as well. This is Ipheion Jessie, but something that is small and spring like this. So you would probably have these one or two other things that are flowering at this time. So some little narcissi all planted up in here. Now you can cheat and you can put a little bit of compost in there, put 3 little pots all together in that same container, so they would all fit in there together, fill it up with compost around those containers. That way, when it rains, you can give it a little bit of water. When these plants have finished and you knock them out of the big container, they are then in smaller containers you can then transplant into the garden. So that's a cheating way of doing it in one way or one aspect. Other things is to look at what are you going to put into in the way of your big lovely terracotta pots. Terracotta pots are beautiful. You know, they're really great. And if you get the frost proof ones like this one, I've had this one probably 10 years. It's gone through loads and loads of frost. It's got this lovely basket pattern on the outside, but the one problem with this one is, can you see how it's wasted? So it has that beautiful waste and it comes out wider at the bottom. If you plant directly into this, you get a large plug. So when you try and tip it out, when you need to replant whatever is in there, it's really quite difficult because it won't come out because it has got that wider bit. It's got to come through this bit at the base. So with containers like this, I tend not to actually plant directly into them. I always use a pot that will go in and sit in there. So such as this beautiful Euphorbia you can just drop it into the container and then you mix it up with your other plants and you don't notice the fact that there is a void here. If you want to plant directly into something like this, which does have that basal bit there, then I would suggest that you fill up to where it is actually then straight with a little bit of gravel or grit or something like broken stones or something like, just to raise it up a little bit, so that when you do come to the point of actually having to turn it upside down and getting the plant material that's in here out, it will then come out much more easily. Look at your containers that you are going. People are really enticed into the ones that look fantastic and they are really beautiful. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there is a problem, but be aware, even with this beautiful lily pot here, you go down. I tend to these days not plant directly into my containers because plants, you get bored of them, don't you? Something that's there and it's the same display all the time. So I try and make it that plants go in there, and I'm cheating planting really. So this one's got quite a deep bit down here. You could put something like a clematis in here, or you can put lily bulbs in it. That's what it's meant for. I put an upside down pot into the bottom like so, and then you can put plants like this all the way around the top. Or because that's taking up that void at the bottom there, you can then plant into this, no problem at all, with compost, and it's not using all of that compost, and then it's much easier to pull those plants out when they need to be done. So that is another thing to look at. So remember, they can be grown in containers. Just ask people very nicely, will it grow in a container? Don't worry about me, it's just me being funny about that. Most people will say yes, but you need to go into a bigger size. So if they're in a container like this, you need to be thinking about an extra 5 centimeters round. So something like this could go into a pot of this size. That would be the next one that it would go into. That gives it plenty of extra compost to go in and about. If you really want to, you could go into something that size, but just remember that sometimes it is better to go step by step, and then the plants will fill up quite nicely and do really well. So keep your old big containers, keep them until they start cracking up and everything else, and they will look really good, and keep going, and you will be very impressed with how they do. The other thing to do is go for this style of container, which has got the straight sides, and then find yourself a whole mass of different size pots that go in. I don't mind the fact that this one shows its orange edge around there. Some people wouldn't like that, but that way I can put this little shrub, and this is one, so it means that I can lift this out of here, and then I could put something else in there, so something like these bulbs to follow on. Once the bulbs are finished, I can then replace my shrub back in there until I find something else that I want to then put into the containers. So yes, things will grow in there. Remember to use a good quality potting medium when you're putting them in. Try and add Osmocote, which is, or the equivalent, which is a slow release pelleted fertilizer, into that potting medium so that the plants have something to feed, and then use something like Maxi Crop and or a tomato feed to water in right the way through the year. Don't overwater, keep them on the dry side preferably, because it's easier to get them wet than it is to dry them out. And then just look at your plants, consider whether they are getting too big. If it is a plant that especially herbaceous, which is going to go sideways, then it needs a wide pot, but maybe a shallower pot. If it's something that is deep rooted, then put it into something that has got a lot of depth there. And that is quite easy to find out. Just ask whoever you're getting the plants from, or do a little bit of research on the plants, and that way they will be fine. So key things are, do not overwater, remember to give them some food through the year, and then plant up or replant, and do as I recommend, and that is get yourself a whole mass of different pots that can go through the season. You don't just use things like this. You can use and utilize troughs quite nicely, and this is one of the things that I do. I've got some raised pallets that I actually have taken some of the pallets pieces out, and I've dropped these lovely troughs into those raised pallets. Doesn't this look fantastic? It's like I've got a hedge of hellebores, but they are all in their containers inside here. So I could change this around, and I could put some Euphorbia in there and just change the feel of what my trough looks like. Hellebore, Euphorbia, hellebore, larger amount there. Or, if I'm feeling a little bit different, I can move it along and play with it like this so it doesn't look the same. I could get another one of the Euphorbias and put them in like that. So I actually think it looks better if it's just interspersed. And this is one of those things whereby you can have this amount of plant material all together like this, and I think that looks really, really good. Then I will use these troughs for my vegetables, and I will plant directly into the trough. All of these plants can either be potted up into bigger containers, or they can go in the ground, and means that next spring I'll have a lot of planting going on. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of what to do and how to put things into containers. Thank you very much for listening.